Clark answered, "If that's the way you want to do business, we'd better dissolve and let you run your own affairs to suit yourself." End quote. Though it was probably bad temper and bluff on Clark's part, Rockefeller lost not a moment in putting a notice of dissolution in the paper. He felt that the timid Clark was a drag on him. He scouted Andrews and knew that he would stay with him. The auction of the oil business was set. The price zoomed up in the bidding between Clark and Rockefeller until the latter bid $72,500, and Clark said, "I'll go no higher. The business is yours." The loser took the commission business in toto as a consolation prize. Rockefeller said, "This was really my start in the oil trade," and he regarded it as the beginning of his success. In the Cleveland Leader of February 15, 1865, was a notice that the former business of Andrews, Clark and Company would be operated from then on as Rockefeller and Andrews. Now, Rockefeller had a free hand and had no one to account to. He's been hampered in his growth up till now and has managed to grow in spite of this. Quote, "Now Rockefeller built a second refinery. Like the Excelsior Works, the first one, the Standard Works was at the head of Kingbury Run." It says it had 2 railroad spurs connecting it to it. By the end of 1866, another company, Rockefeller and Company, was incorporated in New York to handle export sales. It was not for some years that Rockefeller undertook to eliminate middlemen. The addition of William Rockefeller was no act of nepotism, so he hired his brother. Will, a shrewd man but jolly and likable, was a tremendous asset. All students of Standard Oil agree, including Miss Tarbell. We know about Ida Tarbell. She wrote the history of Standard Oil and falsified a lot of stuff about it. He had made a success in business on his own, becoming a partner in a commission house. He was like his father and much different in temperament and outlook from his older brother. For one thing, he believed wholly in living, not giving. Now, there it asserts that John D. Rockefeller gave quite a bit, was quite generous, and donated a lot. The $72,500 that Rockefeller had paid Clark for the business had not only cleaned out all his cash, but had undoubtedly strained all his credit facilities. Rockefeller, too, was not a loner and was looking for a partner with acumen matching his to carry the load. All he hoped for, and more, came with Henry M. Flagler, whose alliance with Rockefeller was one of the luckiest events of his career. Now, isn't that interesting that, quote, "he was not a loner and was looking for a partner with acumen matching his to carry the load." So you can go twice as far with a good partner, but you have to have a good partner. Not just any partner will do. Might that be the case in any given business venture? Is it too much for one man to take on? Well, you know, that's something to consider, I suppose. Flagler had left home at the age of 14, so Flagler was a great capitalist, and we're going to hear just a bit about him here. He left home at the age of 14 because his presence was a financial burden on the family. He walked 9 miles to Medina, where he got his first transportation. He worked his way on a canal boat and landed in Republic, Ohio, almost penniless. There he joined his half-brother Dan Harkness, the son of his mother by a previous marriage. Fine, he is related to Mr. Harkness, and he married one of the daughters of Lamon. Isabel and Henry Flagler married the other, Mary Harkness. Showing great acuteness as a businessman, Flagler was made a member of Lamon's firm, Harkness and Company. So he marries in to Harkness and Company. By 1862, Flagler had $50,000. The salt mining business was going great guns in Saginaw, Michigan, the business of boring for salt water having collapsed because all the workers flocked to the oil wells. For a time, Flagler made money, but in 1865, what happened in 1865? Prices collapsed. Flagler had lost his $50,000. As the war ended, prices went down. He was $50,000 in debt, so a $100,000 difference. Dan Harkness lent him $50,000. He's now back to zero. And he was back east in Cleveland looking for another fortune. So what's he going to do now? Well, he had a stroke of luck by marrying into this family. Quote, Stephen Harkness, who was 12 years older than Flagler, was in the grain commission business in Monroeville, Ohio. Good thing he married into this family. And this Stephen Harkness also operated a distillery. Stephen happened to be a good friend of Senator John Sherman, who was a member of the Senate Finance Committee, and who gave him a tip. Here's the tip. Clue you in on some upcoming legislation. Quote, the first Comprehensive Internal Revenue Act of 1862, a Civil War measure, would impose a tax of $2 on every gallon of distilled spirits. That's extremely high. Quote, this was a very heavy tax, so heavy in fact that the term bootlegging originated from the habit of hiding untaxed liquor in the high boots worn then. End quote. I believe that bootlegging was a reference from the time of the teens and 20s, the Prohibition. But it says here it dates clear back to the Civil War, when a $2 a gallon tax was levied. $2 was a lot of money back then. Stephen decided to make a killing. He bought all the liquor in sight. He borrowed from every bank that would lend him a dime. He sold grain for farmers and staved off payment. So he took their grain, sold it, took the money, bought liquor. It's probably one of the few instances in the history of the world where somebody sold somebody's one thing, bought liquor with it, and didn't drink the liquor. At the time, he sent a wire to Rockefeller, then in the commission business, quote, why the hell don't you remit for the last car of corn I shipped? Unless I get it soon, I will bust. So, end quote. He didn't really need it because he's going to go bust, but he needed it for this opportunity. He couldn't tell Rockefeller about the opportunity. So anyways, thus by hook and crook he cornered a good supply of liquor that he sold for a fat profit when the tax was imposed and the price went up. He made $300,000. That's a fat killing today, 150 years later. Moving to Cleveland, he made some more hundreds of thousands in real estate and was perhaps the richest man in the city. Rockefeller had known Flagler in the days before his salt venture, when they had done business together. Now they renewed their friendship. They had office space together in the Sexton building. Flagler first had tried to market a process for making the perfect horseshoe, but this had failed. Then he went back into the grain commission business. He inherited this commission business from Rockefeller and, quote, built up a business of his own, then bought out Clark, Rockefeller's old partner. Being the heir of Rockefeller's old business, he had a link with him. So Rockefeller knew about the guy. Rockefeller took an immediate liking to Flagler. He proposed to Flagler that he join him in the oil business and that he tap Harkness for capital. Harkness was quite willing to be convinced, and so a new era began. A notice was published in Cleveland newspapers of an agreement dated February 28, 1867, for a limited partnership under the name of Rockefeller, Andrews, and Flagler. And this new company solved their problem of capital. Quote, no longer would Rockefeller have to go about begging for loans. Since the oil business was considered speculative, such loans were often for short-term and high interest. Harkness's name, remember this is lucky that they married into the Harkness family, Harkness's name behind the firm as silent partner was such a solid guarantee that if credit was needed, there would be little difficulty in getting it. Harkness himself was always ready with help. In 1872, Standard had a fire in New York and lost $700,000 in property. The insurance company delayed payment. Of course they did. When Rockefeller called on Harkness, he said, quote, John, I'll give you all I've got. Harkness helped John rebuild, and, quote, Rockefeller recalled, that was the kind of man Harkness was, end quote. And what a wonderful investment it was for Harkness, get this, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars on Harkness's part, because when the trust was dissolved in 1911, the Harkness family interest was second only to that of Rockefeller's, because John Rockefeller paid him back on such generous terms, and his interest in that grew so drastically. In Flagler, Rockefeller gained